I woke up in the stillness before dawn, the kind of silence that wraps around your ribs and squeezes. My side of the bed was cold. It had been for days. Today was the funeral. I sat on the edge of the mattress for a long while, hands resting on my thighs, staring at the closed closet door. Then I stood up, walked to the drawer, and pulled out his tie, the navy one with the faint silver stripe. He used to wear it to church. I folded it carefully, twice, and tucked it into my purse like a secret. Getting dressed felt mechanical. Black dress. Black shoes. No jewelry. I looked like a widow, but I didn't feel like one. Grief, as it turns out, doesn't hit like they say. It doesn't rush in. It erases. I didn't feel sad. I felt gone. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Rowena: "Please don't make a scene today. The family needs peace." I stared at it for a long moment before locking the screen. No good morning. No "I'm sorry for your loss." Just a reminder of where I stood. Harlan Sr. had made that clear too. Since the moment John passed, he moved in like a storm with pressed suits and firm handshakes. Everyone deferred to him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. At the church, sunlight barely warmed the old stone steps. Inside, ushers guided people to their seats, row after row of well-dressed mourners. Some I recognized, many I didn't. I paused near the front, instinctively walking toward the family pews. "Miss? The guest section is to the left," an usher whispered. I blinked at him. "I'm his wife." He hesitated. "Sorry, I was just told." I didn't finish the sentence. I turned, stepped aside, and sat 3 rows back, close enough to see, far enough to be forgotten. The program was already in my hands before I noticed. Vance, John Harlan. Beloved son, brother, friend. No mention of me. Not even a survived by his wife, Carolyn. I scanned the text, waiting for the mistake to correct itself. But there it was, again and again, Harlan Sr. and Rowena mentioned. Nieces and nephews listed. Not me. Not once. A murmur floated through the pews behind me. Wasn't she just his caregiver? She lived there, but they weren't close. I stared straight ahead. The priest stepped up, cleared his throat, and began. "Today we honor the life of John Harlan Vance, a pillar of the Vance family." The words blurred. I gripped the tie in my purse, its fabric soft and warm against my fingers. I repeated to myself, quietly, over and over, I was his family too. After the service, I moved like smoke through the crowd. Harlan shook hands near the altar, smiling thinly, thanking people for coming. He saw me. He didn't nod. He didn't speak. I turned toward him, and Rowena intercepted me halfway. "You really should go rest," she said, placing a hand on my arm. "This has been hard on all of us. But this isn't your place anymore." I stared at her hand. Her nails were perfectly done, not a chip in sight. "This is still my husband's funeral," I said. She tilted her head, her voice low and smooth. "Exactly." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, air thick in my lungs, memory pressing against my chest like a stone. The last thing John ever said to me, 2 days before he passed, floated back. "Dad will look after you." Right. I left without saying goodbye. By evening, the sky had shifted from pale gold to gray. I pulled into the driveway, reached for my keys, and stepped out. The lock felt stiff. I jiggled it. The key didn't turn. I tried again. Still nothing. That's when I saw it, the new padlock on the side gate. And a truck idling at the curb. A moving company logo on the side. I backed away slowly, confusion prickling up my spine. Maria, the housekeeper, stepped out. Her face was tight with worry. "I'm sorry, Miss Carolyn. Mr. Vance said it's family property now. He changed the locks this morning." I stared at her. I looked up at the house, my house. Our house. "No," I said, not loud, just certain. "No." She didn't reply. I turned, walked back to my car, and sat. The engine was off. The sky was dark. Inside my purse, the tie weighed more than it should. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat there until the stars came out and the house behind me went dark. "They locked me out of my life," I whispered. I gripped the steering wheel. My nails dug into the leather. If silence was power, then mine had just begun. By midnight, the street was empty. My name had been erased. My home taken. But not the truth. As I pulled away from the curb, I whispered to the windshield, They took everything. But they don't know what I remember. The envelope came in the afternoon. Cream colored, too thick, the kind you can't tear without making a mess. My name was written in precise block letters, Carolyn Marvell. No return address, just the gold-stamped seal of Harper, Gage, and Bloom. I already knew it was from Dexter. Estate clarification, it said. That's what the letter called it. I didn't have much left to clarify. Still, I pressed my dress shirt, tied my hair back, and showed up 15 minutes early. I wanted to look composed, even if my hands trembled when I buttoned my cuffs. Dexter's office hadn't changed. Mahogany furniture, thick carpets, leather chairs too cold for comfort. The kind of place designed to keep emotion out and money in. The receptionist, Sandra, I think, barely looked at me. Her smile was quick, rehearsed. She tapped something on her screen, then gestured vaguely toward the door. Didn't say a word. I took a slow breath and stepped in. Dexter stood when I entered, gesturing politely. Carolyn. Thank you for coming. He didn't offer condolences. Not anymore. I sat across from him, knees crossed at the ankle, trying not to wrinkle my skirt. The air felt heavier than it should have. I assumed this was about John's life insurance, I said. He hesitated. It's more about ownership and filings. Formalities. He pushed a folder across the desk. Inside, signatures, dates, notary stamps. Legalese swimming in ink. The partnership was dissolved, he said. John withdrew his interest 2 weeks before his passing. My eyes locked on the page. My name was there, scratched out. Replaced by a new one. Rowena Blythe Carver. The words blurred for a second. Then cleared. I don't understand, I said. You were previously listed as a co-signer on the business trust, he said. It was amended. The documents show your consent. I remembered the form Harlan Sr. handed me last month. Just routine, he said. Tax simplification. John had nodded. I'd signed. Wait, I said. That form, he said it was about taxes. Dexter didn't flinch. It was about restructuring. The room tilted slightly. My voice came out low. So I signed myself out of my husband's business. Out of my own life. I wouldn't phrase it that way, he said quietly. I looked down at my signature. My own name, weaponized. Mrs. Marvell, I advise you not to contest this. It's complex. Costly. You think I care about the cost? He didn't answer. The door creaked open. Rowena walked in, holding a takeout cup, as if she just happened to be in the neighborhood. Oh, she said brightly, didn't realize you were still in here. She turned to Dexter. Am I early? Just finishing, he replied. She glanced at the folder in front of me, then at me. I know this is hard, Carolyn, she said. But we're trying to keep the family intact. The family, I repeated. It struck me how that phrase had shifted. I wasn't part of it anymore. I was the smudge they were trying to scrub out. I stood, folding the documents back into the folder, not because I wanted to be polite, but because if I didn't, I'd slam them in her face. Tell me something, I said. If I'm not family, what am I now? A footnote? She smiled sweetly. No, of course not. You're just not legally entitled anymore. I walked out without another word. The courthouse was a 20-minute drive, but I don't remember the traffic lights or turns. I just remember the silence in my car, and the shape of that signature in my mind. Inside the county registry, it smelled like floor polish and dry paper. I requested the most recent deed filings. The clerk was young, polite, too tired to care. He pulled it up on the screen. 3 days after the funeral, my name had been removed from the house deed. Reassigned under a maintenance trust managed by Harlan Vance Sr. I felt my stomach drop. Not from surprise, but from the realization that I wasn't even surprised. They didn't wait for the flowers to wilt, I muttered. The man in line behind me leaned forward. Happens all the time with old money families, he said. One day you're in, next day you're just a story. I took pictures of the screen. I requested a printed copy. I wrote down dates, times, clerk ID numbers. I didn't cry. I documented. At the motel, I spread everything on the bed, legal papers, photos, receipts. My ward table. The room reeked of cheap detergent and lemon air freshener, but I barely noticed. I stared at the paper trail, traced the names again and again. Then I pulled out the motel notepad and wrote 4 words at the top of a clean sheet. Proof begins here. Underneath, I added a quote that had once stopped me in my tracks: "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Eleanor Roosevelt. I read it aloud, then again and again, each time, my voice steadier. That night, just after I turned off the light, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. An unknown number. One message: "You should stop digging, Mrs. Marvell. Some things are better left buried." I stared at it and smiled. Rain dripped off the storage unit's corrugated roof while I stood outside, key in hand. The clouds hung low, heavy with unspoken things. I hesitated a moment, thought about turning back. But I didn't. I walked inside across the cracked concrete floor, past boxes labeled Vance Archives, past trunks full of outdated suits and yellowed letters. The air smelled like mildew and family secrets long tucked away. The key turned with a soft click. I lifted the latch and pulled the door up. The space was narrow and packed tight. I found a cardboard box marked in black marker, "Marvell Household, Archive 1960. My husband's childhood friend, Cilla Rhodes Merritt, had left it for me." I opened it. Inside, a leather-bound ledger, the cover cracked, the pages yellowed. I touched the cover and thought, some things were meant to stay hidden. As I flipped the ledger open, I realized it wasn't about my husband, it was about his father's legacy. A page dated 1961 listed the purchase of the house. The seller, Imogene Vance, my late mother-in-law. The buyer, Harlan Whitcomb Vance Sr. A note in the margin: "Transfer of house deed under duress, per lawyer G. Fairbanks." My breath caught. Something in me shifted. Memory replayed old dinner table moments. Harlan Sr. always said, "This house is a legacy." My husband said once, quietly, almost defensively, "Dad just wants to protect what's ours." But the ledger told a different story. Protection turned to possession. I closed my eyes. I saw Imogene's portrait in the foyer, her soft smile hiding fear. Then I saw Rowena, at that same table, laughing. And me, silently shrinking. I sat down on a dusty trunk and let the revelation wash through me. I wasn't the first wife who had the story of inheritance rewritten without her voice. Generations of favors and check signings and family trusts had silenced women like me. The ledger had names I recognized: Gideon Fairbanks, a golf buddy of Harlan's. Praises in the wrong places. Windows closed. Doors locked. Deals done in whispers. My phone glowed in my lap, no message yet. I closed it. I picked up the ledger, turned to one specific page: Imogene's line item: "Inheritance settlement, $0. Reason, incapacity." The term incapacity always used for women who grew sick, or afraid, or didn't understand. My chest tightened. Night was coming. I zipped up the ledger and tucked it into a backpack. My fingers brushed the blue floral tablecloth I had brought, my silent nod to what I had lost. I climbed into the car and drove away from the unit. The rain had stopped. Streetlights glinted on wet pavement. I noticed headlights behind me, far enough to be unsettling, close enough to matter. They stayed there. My voice in my head grew steady: "This isn't about the house anymore. It's about the story." I pressed the pedal a little harder. The car wove between oak trees, the road slick. I ignored the lights following. The ledger rested in the passenger seat. When I reached the motel, I pulled the papers out and spread them across the bed: ledger, archived bills, notes, faded ink. I stared at the ceiling, thinking of a quote I once heard: "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." I whispered it aloud. Then I recorded a voice memo: "This isn't revenge. It's return. And I'm done waiting." I didn't sleep until I cleared the bed into one pile: evidence. Everything else into trash. Morning wouldn't be the same. 2 weeks after I held the ledger in my hands, I found myself standing at the marble entrance of the Charleston Country Club. The Vance family's memorial fundraising gala was in full swing, music echoing from the tall ceilings, waiters gliding by with silver trays, and old money scenting the air like perfume. I wore the same black dress I'd worn to the funeral. Not to recycle grief, but to remind them it wasn't over. Everything about the event was curated: the spotlights, the stage, the laugh lines rehearsed. My father-in-law, Harlan Sr., opened the evening with a speech about legacy and family honor. When he referenced me, he used the phrase, "those who married into our family." Just that. No name. No place. At my seat, table 12, I reached into my purse and slid out the blue floral tablecloth, creased, folded, mine. I ran my thumb over the edge and glanced down at the program. That's when I noticed it. Under the section titled Key Donors and Family Patrons, the card for seat 17 read Rowena Blythe Carver, Vance Family. There was no card for me. No mention of Carolyn. Not even a mistake, they had simply erased me from print. A woman across the table, in pearls and polite wine buzz, leaned in and said, "Aren't you Carolyn Marvell?" I looked at her, smiled just enough, and said, "I'm just a guest tonight." Later that evening, I stepped outside the ballroom for air and caught part of a hushed conversation near the valet desk. "She was never truly one of us," Rowena whispered to Harlan Sr. "We're just correcting the family ledger." I stood frozen behind the stone column. The same word, ledger. They weren't just rewriting paperwork. They were rewriting people. The night went on. The wine poured. The MC took the stage and began the live auction. The Vance's take portfolio flashed across the giant screen: trusts, homes, lots of land. Including the house that had been mine. The house I folded his laundry in. The home I'd painted, fought in, forgiven in. Rowena raised her glass and declared, "To preserving the Vance legacy, untouched, uncorrupted." I didn't flinch. Didn't excuse myself. I sat with my back straight and eyes steady. The room was lit for show, but inside me, something dimmed, and something else lit up in its place. When I returned to my rented townhouse, I placed the floral tablecloth on the kitchen table. I unfolded it slowly, smoothing it out like skin that had been wrinkled too long. Then I pulled out the notes from the storage unit, the ledger from 1960, marked up, annotated, cross-referenced. I spoke out loud. The loudest person in the room doesn't always own the voice of truth. Then I opened my laptop. Typed an email to Dexter Harper, subject line, legacy and definitions. Short, direct. I pressed send. And I made a vow, not out loud this time. Just a firm thought as I sat alone in silence: I will take back what's mine. Not for vengeance. For correction. Around 2 a.m., I was still awake, sipping lukewarm coffee when I heard the knock. Soft. Just once. I opened the door. No one there. Only a plain envelope on the mat. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. A picture from the gala. The banquet table. My name, missing. On the back, in small typed print, "Watch your next move." I stared at it for a long time. Then I put it in the drawer, under the ledger, under the notes. Let them watch. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. The tables faced the harbor, morning light glinting off the water, crisp autumn air brushing against the terrace. I chose this place because it was public, neutral. No suits. No courtroom smells. Just coffee, sunlight, and the taste of control in my mouth. Rowena's message was simple: let's talk like grown women. No lawyers. I brought what I needed: printed ledger pages, annotated names, key dates highlighted in red. I rehearsed quietly in my head: power isn't loud, it's documented. My dress was clean, calm. I was not here to beg. I was here to set terms. When Rowena arrived, she gave me a thin smile. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sitting down across from me. I nodded, didn't rise. She didn't mention the house. I didn't mention the suit. Instead, I waited. A waiter brought our cups, black for me, latte for her. She took her first sip and exhaled. "You know," she began, "everyone's concerned about you, Carolyn. Your mental stability." I didn't flinch. I set the folder on the table, opened it to the first marked page. "What's this?" Rowena asked, her voice light but her fingers gripping the rim of her cup. "This," I said, "is your father's legacy, and your mother's erasure." Rowena's eyes flicked to the note margin: "Transfer under duress." Her lips parted, and for a moment, I saw her falter. Then she laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "You think this changes anything?" "I know it does," I replied. There were glances from the next table. The cafe didn't know what was at stake, but the light changed in Rowena's eyes. She leaned forward. "You were always just convenient." I looked her in the eye. "Then let's be inconvenient now." She frowned. "You'll tear this family apart." "I'm just holding up a mirror," I said. The words hung in the air. I pointed at a highlighted line: G. Fairbanks, attorney, voidable transfer. She scoffed again. "So what? Old money plays old games. I tapped the paper. So do I. She slid her wallet across, paid for the lattes. I did nothing. I stood. You've got 72 hours to come clean, publicly. Or I go wide. She stayed in her seat. I walked away. The harbor breeze felt different, the kind that carries warnings. Later that night, back in my rented townhouse, I found a white envelope slipped under the door. No sender. Inside, a single typed sentence on heavy paper: "You were warned once. This is twice." I held it in the palm of my hand. Not fear, clarity. I placed it above the papers on my desk. I set another note: "Proof begins here." I poured a glass of water. I sat at the table, looking at the ledger pages, the photograph of the auction, the spreadsheet of transfers. The night was quiet. I didn't sleep. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. I thought of an old saying: "They count on our silence." I sprayed the water slowly. The clock ticked. Silence said what they couldn't. I found myself standing in the lobby of Dexter Harper's office. The day was fading, the windows showing charcoal clouds over Charleston. Inside, everything felt heavy: velvet chairs, a musty ocean breeze leaking through the door, framed photographs of the legacy house hanging like warnings. I carried the blue floral tablecloth tucked inside my coat. I placed it in my pocket to remind myself what was at stake: not just the house, but my worth. Dexter greeted me with a nod. He motioned toward two folders on the table, one labeled Audio Imaging, 1960, the other Event Footage, Carver Gala. He didn't smile. "Ready to move?" he asked. I nodded. "How soon can we file?" I said. He met my gaze. Immediately. When I left the office it felt different. I could sense the shift, years of quiet waiting turning into action. I walked out into the afternoon light, the wind whispered through the oak trees. The weight of those folders wasn't just in my bag, it was in my mind. I understood, I was no longer invisible. Back at the motel, I plugged the audio into my laptop. The voice was faint, crackling with static: Imogene Vance, whispering about signing a deed under pressure, about losing her children if she didn't comply. I sat still for a long time, listening, feeling something old crack. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was hers. The realization settled into my bones: I was stepping into a fight that began long before I ever arrived at that house. There were names in that recording: lawyers, trustees, friends who smiled at dinner and closed doors at night. I copied the file, secured it off-site, and bookmarked the timestamps. My hands didn't shake. I whispered to myself, truth is like lightning, brief, bright, no one forgets it. My heart hammered. The ledger, the audio, the footage, they all lined up. And I knew crossing the line meant no return. That evening I left the motel in darkness, drove out to the Vance estate, now repurposed as an event property. The grounds were silent, except for distant floodlights. I carried a compact camera in the glove compartment, stepped close to a window, and watched Rowena and a Vance executive speak in hushed tones. I held my breath when the phrase hit me: the ledger cover-up must remain internal. My pulse moved into overdrive. I recorded the scene, tagged it: Evidence Vault, Carver Estate, October 21, 2025 to 22:13 EST. The flicker of a camera light was a soft explosion inside me. They thought I was asleep. I'd been waking for years. Returning to the motel, I placed the tablecloth on the kitchen table, spread the evidence, audio printouts, the compact camera, the ledger notes. I drafted a press release: short, direct: former Marvell spouse challenges the Vance legacy house ownership. Evidence forthcoming. I quoted Maya Angelou: when you know better you do better. I felt calm. Determined. Then a knock on the door. A maintenance worker holding a slip: you should reconsider your next step. I folded it, slipped it into the envelope with the evidence. I looked out the window at the lights on the estate across the harbor. I said softly, let them burn with the truth in their inbox. Before I shut my laptop, a warning flashed: new login attempt, Vance SR network, unauthorized access detected. My phone buzzed, unknown number texted: you broke the code. Now you'll pay the price. I didn't flinch. I leaned back in my chair and watched as the waves hit the shore. Payment meant something different in their world. In mine, The price was transparency. I arrived at the Vance estate under the guise of returning what I'd claimed belonged to me. The oak door of the library creaked behind me, and the portraits of stern ancestors watched from dim frames. I carried my tablet heavy in my palm, loaded with the ledger, loaded with hidden footage. The old librarian cleared her throat and said quietly, "Mr. Fairbanks left the files long ago." That sting of dismissal settled in me. I passed rows of books until I reached the desk. A large portrait of Harlan Sr. loomed above me, eyes unflinching, legacy unchallenged. I slid open a hidden drawer. I lifted the ledger. I thought, this is where the story cracks. I pulled the ledger out carefully and opened to the page dated 1961. There it was, Imogene Vance's name, handwriting faded but clear, beneath it, signatures including H. Vance. Annotation, marital trust, transfer approved. I raised the tablet and took a photo. The shutter sound echoed, though no one heard. Then I looked up. Rowena was standing in the doorway, face cold and still. "You shouldn't touch things older than you," she said. I replied softly, "I should touch the truth." The air froze. Between those shelves I reached a pivot point I never saw coming. The ledger made more than numbers, it made history. I left the room before she could speak again, my mind racing, the path ahead finally clear. Rowena followed me into the garden, dusk folding shadows beneath lanterns. She was shaken. Her fingers trembled as she knocked over a stack of old letters addressed to Imogene. She blamed the shelf. I stood a few steps back and said, "That shelf holds my life, not just your memory." She stormed off into night. I didn't chase. I moved slowly after her to the back gate, watching her silhouette vanish. In that moment I realized, I was no longer a silent fixture of their story. I was the one writing. In the garden I stopped. I switched my tablet to presentation mode and sent the photo to a journalist's inbox. I said out loud, "If he wants a legacy, I'll give him one, based on the truth." Rowena stood opposite me, lips parted, eyes wide. I quoted Maya Angelou, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I handed her a printed page, "I am part of your story whether you believe it or not." Then I walked away. The estate gate loomed behind me, but my steps moved forward. Calm, assured. I felt power shift, not loud or flashy, but fundamental. The ledger, the footage, the names, they had become tools. And I was wielding them. As I exited the gate I heard a ping. My phone lit up, the ledger photo reposted on social media tagged Vance Legacy Leak. A single short message popped up, "Game on." I didn't shrink. I didn't look back. The night air felt colder, but clearer. They thought the secret would stay buried. They were wrong. I entered the boardroom under the guise of presenting a charitable initiative. From my pocket slipped a USB drive labeled 1960 archive, looking harmless, thoughtful. Senior executives sat in semicircles, lawyers in dark suits, and at the head of the table sat Harlan Vance Sr., his posture straight and deliberate. I placed the blue floral tablecloth, folded neat, under my folder as a quiet symbol. This fight wasn't just mine, it was mine in full view. A board member cleared his throat. "Let's keep this brief, family business first, legal later." I smiled inside. They thought they were running the meeting. I came to change the agenda. I clicked the USB into the screen. A graph appeared, Vance Holdings shifting assets from the Marvell Trust into a Vance Maintenance Trust. Harlan's statement stalled mid-sentence, "This is outdated." The senior executive rose, voice cool, "With all due respect, Mr. Vance, we need clarification from Mrs. Marvell." The room went silent. Rowena stood up, mouth open, words failing on her lips. I took a breath, the moment hung like glass before it shattered. I quoted Franklin D. Roosevelt softly, "In the truest sense, freedom cannot be bestowed, it must be achieved." My voice held. Harlan's color drained. I watched it. The ledger, the audio, the footage, they proved what I sensed, the power structure was cracking. Chairs shifted, phones tapped, alliances rebalanced. My quiet proof was now their loud headline. I stood, handing each board member a sealed envelope, evidence package, immediate review. My tone steady, "You invited me tonight to talk legacy. Here's the real ledger of legacy." Rowena tried to interrupt, the room waited on her. I said, "I don't want your pity, I want correctness. A board member asked if legal action was imminent. I responded, yes. Or a public statement that you support transparency. The tension snapped. My hands did not tremble. I saw the narrative lift from me onto them. For years I'd been quiet. But now I was chosen. I said quietly, the truth doesn't beg, it presents itself. Movement rippled. Rowena rose, blew out a breath. My role shifted from silent widow into active voice. I exited the boardroom and stepped onto the terrace overlooking the harbor. City lights reflected on the water, the air was salt-chilled but clear. I remembered the house we once called home, when family seemed safe, not suffocating. I whispered, I came here for a home, now I'm leaving with a name. I sent the final email, subject line, decision finalized, Marvel position. Then I walked away from the estate and its title because I already owned the truth. My steps were calm, focused. The fight wasn't about reclaiming walls, it was about reclaiming respect. A wave hit the pier. It echoed inside me. I let it. My phone buzzed. I looked down, a message I didn't expect. A photo from anonymous account, Vance's legacy leak, showing the ledger on social media. The caption reads simply, game on. I didn't jump. I didn't flee. I paused, watched the harbor lights. The vault wasn't silent anymore. I was the one turning the key. By the time I reached the Marvel estate that morning, the fire was long gone. Smoke lingered like a memory that refused to clear. What used to be a house of portraits and polished floors was now blackened beams and silence. I stood behind the yellow tape, hands in my coat pockets. Funny, I murmured, how something so permanent can vanish while you're still holding the keys. The fire chief said it was electrical. No foul play. He mentioned there'd been no insurance left under Harlan's name. I nodded, though I already knew. I bent down, picked up what was left of a picture frame, our wedding photo, half burned. My face was gone, his remained. Somehow that felt right. The ashes didn't make me sad. They made me lighter. Every brick of that house had carried a lie. I knew when it would burn, and I didn't stop it. Weeks before, I had moved out everything that mattered, the documents, the ledger, the photos that told the real story. I watched the embers with a still heart. That house held secrets, I whispered, but it never held me. I turned and walked toward my car. There was no cinematic goodbye, no tearful glance over my shoulder. Just the sound of gravel under my shoes. For the first time, I understood the difference between revenge and release. My new office was small, 2 windows, sunlight spilling across a wooden desk. On the wall hung my diploma and a framed quote that read, "Legacy is not what they leave you. It's what you choose to keep." I'd started teaching online classes for women, widows mostly, how to read financial statements, manage estates, and keep their names where they belong. The emails came quietly at first. Your session gave me courage. My late husband's family treated me the same. I read them all. I wasn't just moving past what happened. I was turning it into something useful. Purpose feels different from victory. It's quieter, steadier. One afternoon, a letter came in a cream envelope. Rowena's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Her words were short, uneven. You were always braver than us. Even Harlan knew it. That was all. No signature. No plea. I folded it once and placed it in a drawer. Some stories deserve their silence. I took the 1960 ledger, wrapped it carefully with my mother's rosary and my daughter's birth bracelet, and locked them all in a safety deposit box. History isn't what's written down, I said to myself. It's what we pass forward. Later that week, I met my daughter and her husband for lunch. The restaurant was nothing fancy, just laughter, sunlight, and the sound of plates being set down. When she reached across the table and held my hand, I realized how much of life I'd almost lost trying to keep a house that was never mine. Now, I didn't need it. I had peace, and that felt like the rarest inheritance of all. As we walked outside, the breeze carried the scent of salt and magnolia. I paused, looking toward where the estate once stood beyond the trees. The house was gone. The fight was over. But the story, mine, had just begun.